And you're back. Many thanks indeed for staying tuned. Tonight we're talking about how and why the youth should be engaged in political processes. We're having Rafael Obonyo, who is a public policy analyst and a youth advocate. Welcome, Mr. Obonyo.
Thank you so very much, Irene. I'm quite pleased to be on this show, but also to be on the show with one of the best presenters.
All right, thank you so much. So my first question to you will be, there has been sentiment that political socialization has not really been anticipated here in Kenya in terms of interrogating people from all ages, especially the youth. Why do you think time on this has remained to be a tall order?
I think for a couple of reasons. One is that politics is considered to be a game for a certain people. So it's considered to be an engagement for a certain class. That is one. Two, I think there hasn't been an endeavor to create sort of an understanding and consciousness on the importance of politics. And so young people grow up not understanding or knowing the importance of politics. Yet politics is extremely important. So like you rightly put it, I mean, there's no socialization on political issues, or rather why politics is important. And three, I think it's just about exclusion, you know, deliberate exclusion of young people. And so we do not give them the knowledge, the awareness, the information that they need. Because remember, and I'm sure we'll be discussing this, later on in the discussion, politics is, when people are informed, an informed voter is a very dangerous voter to deal with. And so many politicians don't like informed voters. And so for that reason, people who are at the center of politics try to make sure that other people are not so much aware of what is happening here. And you find many young people, and also, you know, many people view politics as a dirty game. And so you don't want to get dirty. And lastly, I think is the issue of, over the years, politicians have made promises that they do not fulfill, and now you realize there's huge voter apathy, especially amongst young voters.
And so my question for you will be, how do you think the youth can deliberately take the first step to be involved in matters political processes, given that the youth are the majority? When you look at the population between 15 and 34, there's quite a number there. So how can they take the bold step to get into these political processes?
I think first, young people must understand that politics is important, and it is important for this reason. In terms of how politics is defined, it's about decision making. It's about addressing conflict. It is about who gets what. It is about a distribution of power and resources. It's about power relations, you know. And so if you're not involved in politics, it means that you're missing out on understanding of who gets what, distribution of resources and power, you know, how decisions are made and how conflicts can be addressed. And this is the reason why young people need to get involved in politics. I mean, there are a couple of reasons, but three are very important. One is it is important to know what is happening around you. You know, whether there's a new law that is coming up, whether there's a policy that is coming up, whether some land is being sold somewhere. You know, it's important to be aware, you know, because we live in a society. Two, it is important to have a say in what is happening around you. You know, for example, whether it is a road that is being built, or it is water that is being put up, or it is about taxes being increased. You know, it is important to have a say. That is very important. And in Kenya now, we have a progressive constitution that talks about public participation.
It is important.
You need to have a perspective, a view, and you need to make sure that whatever is happening, you are in charge of that, and you have a say in it. Third is realizing that decisions that are being made by other people will affect you. And so if you're not involved, it means that people will make decisions for you, or other decisions that are going to affect you. And so it is important for you to get involved in politics. And how can young people do that? Young people can do that by realizing the power they have to take charge of politics. And in fact, Aristotle explains it so well that politics is like the master science. Government
I'll cut you right there. We're taking a short break. We're taking a really short commercial break. We'll be right back, returning with this particular discussion. Do stay tuned. Thank you for staying tuned. Let us continue with our discussion. Now, Mr. Bunya, as you were saying, the question has been, do you think youth really know what they want? Because they can't really engage in a political process when they don't even really know what they want on the table.
I think first, like I said, young people need to understand the importance of politics. And like I said, it's if they do not understand the importance of politics, if they don't get involved, other people are going to make decisions that are going to affect them on their behalf, and they're going to affect them. And then also they need, so young people need to be informed for them to be engaged. So that bit of being informed is extremely important. But the second thing is young people need to organize themselves to be able to engage and influence politics. It is very, very important, because unless they do that, then the numbers that we're talking about, Kenya's population is largely youthful. 80% of the population is below age 35. Youth are, the largest demographic in terms of numbers. But that counts for nothing. That means nothing if you're not organized to be able to take control. You're not united. You're not organized to take control. So young people need to be informed so that they engage in politics in an informed way. And two, they need to be organized so that they engage in politics in a very organized way, so that they can be able to influence politics and take control. And three, young people need to, politics is a dialogue. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. It's sort of a debate, a continuous discussion, because it's about, who is taking what, who is getting what, who is taking control of government policies and all that. So young people need to ask themselves, what do we want in that space? And organize themselves in a way that they can be able to get whatever they want in that space.
All right. Yeah. Now, the concern has been, and it has been a complaint, I'm sure you've seen it even in social media, that even when it comes to key elective positions, we have seen different regimes ignore the youth. And I'll cite an example. We had an issue of the former Vice President Mudi Awori being appointed. I believe he's 90 and over. And there was an uproar on social media that the youth are not even being involved in elective positions. If you cannot trust them in elective position, what more of the ballots? What would you intimate of that?
It's been said that a society that fails to tap into the energies and creativities of its young people will be left behind, will not make headways, will not make any progress. So first we need to understand that excluding the youth does not just affect the youth, it affects the society at large. Because when you exclude the youth, you also miss out on, freshness, fresh ideas that young people have. You lose out on the creativity that young people have. You lose out on the energies that young people have. You lose out on the dynamism and the enthusiasm that young people have. So first of all, we must realize as a country and as a society that by ignoring and excluding the youth, it is not just youth that are getting affected. As a society, we are also missing out. So that is one thing. Two, we must realize that just because young people lack what we call experience, and what has been emphasized over the years, does not mean that they are inadequate. Young people have, like I said, fresh ideas which make them powerful beyond measure. And so we need to realize that we need to tap into that. Three, young people must use their numbers to put in place government that cares about them. Because young people cannot vote and complain later. By the time they're going to vote, they must know whom are we going to vote for? What is our stake? Does this person or this political party care about our issue? Where are we? How many are we? All that. So we cannot complain later. We must be the ones, taking charge and making sure that our issues are taken care of. And so, and I mean, just a warning and a caution to governments that they cannot ignore the youth. Because they have the numbers, but also by ignoring them, you're not just losing out, you're also creating a very risky and dangerous kind of situation, because when young people are pushed to the periphery and are marginalized, chances are they're going to, fight back or organize themselves in other ways. And we've seen that happen because young people feel left out and excluded. They start organizing themselves into their own spaces, which is quite unfortunate and threatens more or less stability
of the group, really. Okay, now let's bring the discussion closer home and talk about the Building Bridges initiative. the youth have complained that even in the initiation of that process, when you look at the use of Haji-led team, you're not seeing really a face that represents the youth. And therefore, they've lamented that if we were not involved in the initiation of the process, then while completing the process, we're not feeling to be a part of it. When you look at how the BBI process has been handled, do you think really it has focused on the youth?
Let me start with the process before we come to the product. The process itself, I think we must realize that young people are not silent recipients. They are not in some waiting room waiting, you know, because that is always the notion that let's do it for the youth. You know, that thing we say, there's nothing for us without us. We must realize that you cannot do anything for the youth without them. So young people need to be involved, not at the tail end, not after, not as beneficiaries, not as mere recipients, not as target, but they must be seen as equal members of the society. And they should be involved in each and every process from the very beginning, from the start to the very end. And so in this case, there is no doubt that young people were not involved in the process. One, in terms of, you just need to look at, like you say, the optics, the constitution of that. They were not involved. When it comes to engaging the youth in the process, you also realize in terms of specifically targeting the youth to be able to give their views, because truly, if you're talking about a process that is going to shape the future of Kenya, who are the future? It is these young people. And so you cannot talk about the forest without really talking about the trees, you know, these young trees. So it is very, very important to realize that young people are not objects. They're not just seated there. They have views, they have perspectives, they have a role to play, and they need to be involved. Having said that, the process of improving the constitution, it's an important process, I think. And so all of us, of course, we cannot discuss authoritatively on the product because it's not out yet. But we are hoping that the BBI report, the final product, is going to also take into consideration key needs and concerns of young people. And so that we are talking about issues of youth representation. We are talking about issues of challenges that young people are facing, like unemployment, challenges that young people are facing, like access to education, access to health, access to affordable housing. We must ensure that the final product, the report, endeavors to sort of address these issues in terms of providing solutions to some of these key needs and concerns. But in terms of the process, I think there's some sort of inadequacy and deficit when it comes to youth engagement.
All right. Now, I know that you are a public policy analyst. I know you have seen what happens when it comes to party politics and party democracy. And you do know that for one to get into the position of being elected, it starts with being in a political vehicle, which is a party. When you look at the party democracy here in Kenya, are you seeing the youth being given a leverage, so to speak? When you look at the big parties here in the country, do you think we are having the youth really take shape in political parties' politics?
I think there is progress in terms of youth participation or youth inclusion in politics and political processes and political parties, for that matter, but we are not there yet. And I say that with looking at, for example, registered party members. There are about 14 million registered party members. Voters who belong to different political parties. Only 27% are young people. And remember the initial, remember we say that young people, 80% of the population of this country are below age 35. If you look at voters, the majority of voters, over 50%, are actually young people. But when it comes now to participation in political parties, you find that young people are not there. In some cases, now we see what we call the youth leagues. But youth leagues are more of sort of side events, you know.
It's a wing, sort of
a wing, yeah. I like the way you put it. It's a wing, really, and nothing much happens at the youth wing. Most of the decisions are made at the neck level, you know, at the top level, and young people largely are always excluded from that. I've always argued that, and sorry to use this analogy, that youth wings are always like Sunday schools. You know how kids are taken to a Sunday school and they're told, you wait there until after the main service, then I'll come pick you up. Then maybe you will share what you discussed at the Sunday school, and they will tell you, oh, that's very, very good. And maybe they'll tell you 1 or 2, 3 things that they discussed at the main service. It shouldn't be like that. We should, while I encourage youth leagues, and there's nothing wrong with having youth leagues, I think we must endeavor to do more to ensure that youth are not just engaged on the side in terms of the youth leagues, but are involved at the very center, which is actually the main thing. That is one. Two, young people need to realize that they cannot influence politics without getting involved in political parties. So we need to get involved in political parties, and we need to fight for our space within political parties. And that would even mean that young people should consider even forming their own political parties. And it has happened in many countries. It has happened in India, it has happened in Egypt, it has happened in a couple of other countries. If you feel the existing political parties do not take care of your issues, your interests, your needs and concerns, I think young people should take another step, a bold step, and say, now we are going to have our own vehicle, because if anything, we are the majority. And if young people are the majority, then they can influence the politics and the governance and the future of this country. And I think they shouldn't be on the sidelines.
All right. Yeah. Now let's focus on some of the youth leaders that have been elected either in the National Assembly and the Senate, even in key positions when it comes to the cabinet, have really been on the front to advocate for youth policies. You are a youth advocate. Do you think they have been on the forefront to champion for these rights, or have they been swallowed in the process altogether?
Thanks. I think that's a good question. First, let me just give a brief that across the country, leaders are becoming younger and younger. If you look at our National Assembly, we have the youngest National Assembly by average age of the leaders in the assembly. If you look at our Senate, it is billed as one of the youngest Senates in Africa, because we have very young leaders there. If you look at our county assembly, 75% of members of county assembly across the country are actually below age 35. But the good news ends there. The good story ends there, because you look at how they how they conduct business, the issues they are concerned about, I mean the positions and decisions they make, and you realize sometimes. And I'm not issuing a blanket condemnation. I'm just saying that you will find that there isn't a stark difference between the way the adult generation operates and these young leaders operate. And so for me, while I continue, and we must continue championing for youth leadership, it's very, very important, but we must not stop there. We must move now to the next level of saying youth leadership is not just about age. It's also about vision and values, that young leaders must truly prove their worth by championing, youth issues and key issues that affect the society. And so we shouldn't just talk about youth leadership, electing someone because they are young. That is good. But we must go further and ask ourselves, what is the difference? What difference are they going to make? Because they normally say if it's dangerous to have a younger leader who is not a good leader than to have an old leader who is a bad leader, because chances are, because of other natural causes, the older leader might just exit the scene, but the young leader will be with you for the longest time. And so if he's not the right leader, then you're going to have a bigger problem. And so I think while we continue championing and pushing for youth leadership, we must demand for accountable youth leadership. We must demand for responsible youth leadership. As it is now, I think a few of them, some of them have done fantastic work, and we can point out and see also, but still many of them haven't been able to do quite well when it comes to representation.
All right, Mr. Bunyo, as we finalize, let us now look at the non-state actors, which include the church, the civil society. Have they really been on the forefront to champion for youth leadership? Given that, if you can remember, in 2002, they really came together to push for the end of the KANU era to the NAC era. And therefore, having such a bold movement to champion for the youth leadership is what we will call for. But have they really taken action on that?
When it comes to civil society, I think there's been some sort of I mean, the civil society has been weakened because some of its members joined the government in 2002, and I think it has taken time before they could reconstitute. And so there's needs to strengthen civil society for them to be able to champion youth leadership. I think there've also been a lot of fragmentation of civil society and no proper coordination for them to be able to champion some of the important and key interest of young people. The church, I think the church has always been involved in politics and governance, in political processes. But how is what people should ask? Are they championing for their own? Are they in it for their own interest, or are they in it for the interest of the society? And I think the church needs to sort of have a conversation and a reflection with itself and realize that they can use their numbers, their influence, their power to champion youth causes and to champion causes, that genuinely champion causes in society. As it is now, nothing much is happening. And youth themselves also must organize themselves in a way that they can champion their own causes. They must be actively involved, and they must see themselves as people with power and not powerless people.
All right, Mr. Bunya, as we finalize, giving you time to give your parting shot. What can the youth do to change their destiny in 1 minute? I
think young people must realize that they have the power. The strongest office that we have in any democracy is that of citizens. Young people are part of the citizenry, and they have the largest numbers. They must use that to take charge, to take control, and to shape the future and the destiny that they desire. It's very important to do that.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Raphael Obonyo, for making time and giving us a perspective on how the youth can engage in political processes 2 years to the elections, and even as you continue to have issues of constitutional changes and whatnot concerning politics here in Kenya.
Thank you so much, Irene, and thanks for having me, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We are taking a short break, but we'll be back in a moment in what is happening in the sports arena. You stay tuned.